The studio lights burned hot, casting a golden glow over the set of the Kelly Clarkson show. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their chatter a low hum as Kelly Clarkson strode out, her signature smile wide but her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd. She wore a tailored navy blazer, her blonde hair catching the light as she waved. The applause swelled, and she soaked it in, her energy infectious. But today wasn't just another episode. Tyler Perry, the media mogul whose name carried weight from Atlanta to Hollywood, was her guest. Known for his grit, his hustle, and his unapologetic storytelling, Perry was a force. The stage was set for something electric, but no one could have predicted how it would unravel. Kelly settled into her chair. The set designed to feel like a cozy living room, all soft creams and warm wood tones. Across from her, Tyler Perry sat, his posture relaxed but his presence commanding. Dressed in a charcoal suit, he exuded confidence, his deep voice steady as he greeted the audience. The first few minutes were smooth, the usual talk show rhythm. Kelly lobbed soft questions about his latest projects, and Perry answered with charm, his laughter filling the room. They bantered about his new film, a gritty drama set in the heart of New Orleans, and the audience ate it up. But beneath the surface there was a tension, subtle at first, like a faint crack in glass dot. It started with a question about representation. Kelly, leaning forward, her hands clasped, asked about the criticism Perry often faced for his portrayals of black women. Her tone was gentle, but the question carried an edge, probing into territory that had sparked debates online and in industry circles. Perry's smile tightened, just enough for those paying attention to notice. He leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest, and responded with measured words. He spoke of his intent, his roots, how his stories came from a place of truth, drawn from the women who raised him. The audience nodded along, but Kelly wasn't done. She pressed further, citing specific critiques, her voice steady but insistent, as if she wanted to peel back layers Perry wasn't ready to show. The shift was palpable. Perry's answers grew shorter, his tone clipped. Kelly, sensing the resistance, doubled down, her questions veering from curious to confrontational. She brought up a recent article that called Perry's work formulaic, a charge that had dogged him for years. The audience stirred, a few gasps cutting through the silence. Perry's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, his calm facade cracked. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm, defending his craft, his choices, his legacy. He spoke of the barriers he'd broken, the empire he'd built from nothing. Kelly nodded, but her expression was unyielding, and she countered with a point. About artistic responsibility, her words sharp. Slicing through the air. The exchange escalated, each pushing back against the other. Kelly's questions felt less like an interview and more like a challenge, while Perry's responses carried a growing edge of frustration. The audience, caught in the crossfire, shifted uncomfortably, their earlier excitement replaced by a tense hush. Perry's hands gripped the armrests, his knuckles tight, as Kelly asked one final question, something about whether he felt his work truly uplifted the communities he claimed to represent. The room held its breath. Perry stared at her, his jaw set, and then, in a move that stunned everyone, he stood, unclipped his mic, and walked off the set without a word. The camera caught Kelly's face, frozen in shock, as the audience erupted into murmurs. The stage manager scrambled, and the show cut to commercial, leaving the tension hanging like smoke. Backstage, the air was thick with chaos. Crew members darted through the narrow corridors, headsets crackling with urgent whispers. Tyler Perry's abrupt exit had left the production team scrambling, their usual rhythm shattered. Nearly dropped a lighting rig, cursing under his breath as he steadied it. The show's producer, a wiry woman with a clipboard clutched like a lifeline, barked orders to reroute the segment. Kelly Clarkson remained on set, her smile gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression as she conferred with her team during the commercial break. The audience, still reeling, buzzed with speculation, their phones already lighting up with posts about the clash. Perry, meanwhile, had retreated to a green room down the hall. The door was closed, but the tension seeped through. Inside, he paced, his polished shoes silent on the carpet. His assistant, a young man named Marcus, hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. Perry's face was a storm, his eyes distant but burning with something raw. He wasn't angry, not exactly, more like a man who'd been pushed to a line he hadn't expected to cross. Marcus offered a bottle of water, but Perry waved it off, his mind elsewhere. He muttered something about respect, about being ambushed, his voice low but heavy with conviction. Marcus nodded, knowing better than to interrupt. On set, the show resumed, but the energy had shifted. Kelly, ever the professional, plastered on a smile and pivoted to a lighter segment, introducing a musical guest with forced enthusiasm. Her voice carried a slight tremor, betraying the effort it took to move past the moment. The audience clapped on cue, but their attention was split, many still glancing toward the wings where Perry had disappeared. Social media was already ablaze, clips of the exchange circulating, dissected by fans and critics alike. Some praised Kelly for holding Perry accountable. Others called her approach disrespectful, accusing her of blindsiding a guest for clout. Back in the green room, Perry's phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from his team, his publicist, even a few industry friends who'd caught wind of the drama. He ignored them, his focus inward. Marcus finally spoke, suggesting they release a statement, something to control the narrative. Perry shook his head. He wasn't ready to play that game, not yet. He needed to process what had happened, to understand why Kelly's questions had cut so deep. It wasn't just the critique of his work. It was the implication that his legacy, his life's mission, was somehow lacking. That stung more than he'd admit. The producer knocked on the green room door, her voice cautious but firm. She asked if Perry would return to the set, offering to smooth things over, maybe even let him speak uninterrupted. Perry listened, his expression unreadable, then declined with a single shake of his head. The producer lingered, clearly torn, before retreating to deal with the fallout. Outside, the show continued, but the audience's energy was fractured, their whispers louder than the applause. Kelly pushed through, her charm dimmed but intact, steering the conversation to safer waters. Yet the weight of Perry's absence lingered, an unspoken question mark hanging over the stage. As the segment wrapped, Kelly's team huddled in a corner, debating how to address the incident. Some urged her to acknowledge it on air, to diffuse the tension with her trademark candor. Others warned against it, citing the risk of escalating the story further. Kelly listened, her arms crossed, her mind racing. She knew the cameras would catch every flicker of emotion, every pause. She also knew Perry wasn't coming back, not today. The realization settled in, heavy and final, as the show barreled toward its next break. The commercial break ended, and the studio lights flared back to life. Kelly Clarkson stood center stage, her posture straighter now, as if steeling herself for the rest of the show. The audience, still unsettled, clapped on cue, but their enthusiasm felt hollow, like an echo of the earlier excitement. Kelly launched into a segment about a new cookbook, her voice bright but strained, the kind of forced cheer that didn't quite reach her eyes. She cracked a joke, and the audience laughed, but it was polite, not heartfelt. The shadow of Tyler Perry's exit loomed large, and everyone felt it. Backstage, the green room had become a pressure cooker. Tyler Perry sat now, no longer pacing, his hands folded in his lap. Marcus, his assistant, scrolled through social media on his phone, reading snippets of posts aloud. The internet was a battlefield. Some users hailed Perry as a hero for standing his ground, while others branded him oversensitive, unwilling to face tough questions. A few posts even speculated about a feud, weaving wild theories about personal grudges between Perry and Kelly. Marcus glanced at Perry, gauging his reaction, but Perry's face was a mask, his thoughts locked away. He finally spoke, his voice, calm but resolute, telling Marcus to put the phone down. He didn't want to hear the noise, not now. On set, Kelly's team fed her updates through her earpiece, their voices urgent but hushed. The story was gaining traction online, trending on multiple platforms. Hashtags were forming, some in support of Kelly's bold questioning, others decrying her for pushing too far. The producer, still clutching her clipboard, signaled from the sidelines, urging Kelly to keep the energy up. But Kelly's rhythm was off, her usual warmth undercut by a flicker of unease. She glanced at the empty chair where Perry had sat, and for a split second, her composure wavered. She recovered quickly, tossing her hair and diving into a story about her kids, but the audience sensed the effort. In the green room, Perry's thoughts churned. He wasn't one to shy away from criticism, but this felt different. Kelly's questions hadn't just challenged his work, they'd questioned his authenticity, his connection to the very people he'd spent decades uplifting. He thought of his mother, her struggles, the stories that fueled his films. The accusation that his work didn't reflect those truths hit like a blade. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his temples. Marcus suggested they leave, get ahead of the story before it spiraled further. Perry shook his head again. Leaving now felt like running, and he wasn't about to give anyone that satisfaction. Meanwhile, the show's final segment approached. Kelly's team had decided against addressing the walk-off directly, opting instead to let the episode wrap cleanly. But Kelly, ever intuitive, felt the weight of the moment as she introduced the closing act. A young singer with a soulful voice, she had lived a brief comment about respecting all perspectives, her tone soft but deliberate. The audience caught the subtext, and a few nodded, though others exchanged glances, unsure what to make of it. The singer took the stage, her performance, a temporary distraction, but the undercurrent of tension remained. As the show neared its end, Perry made a decision. He stood, straightened his suit, and told Marcus to call his driver. He wasn't returning to the set, but he wasn't ready to disappear either. He wanted to speak, but on his terms, not dictated by a studio or a trending topic. The green room door opened, and he stepped into the hallway, his presence drawing every eye. The crew froze, unsure what came next, as Perry moved toward the exit, his steps deliberate, his mind already racing toward what he'd do to reclaim the narrative. The studio's back exit swung open, and Tyler Perry stepped into the late afternoon light, the Los Angeles air warm against his skin. His driver, a quiet man named Victor, stood ready by a sleek black SUV, opening the door without a word. Perry slid inside, his face unreadable, as Marcus followed, clutching a tablet now flooded with notifications. The door shut with a soft thud, muffling the distant hum of the city. Inside the car, silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint buzz of Marcus's phone. Perry stared out the window, the studio shrinking in the rear view as they pulled away. His mind wasn't on the posts or the trending hashtags, but on what came next. How to turn this moment into something he controlled. Back at the studio, Kelly Clarkson wrapped the episode with her usual grace, thanking the audience and flashing a smile that masked the day's strain. As the cameras cut, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping. The crew bustled around her, dismantling the set, but Kelly lingered, her thoughts tangled. She hadn't meant to push Perry that far, but she also hadn't expected him to walk. Her team swarmed, offering reassurances, but their words felt hollow. The producer approached, suggesting a quick debrief, but Kelly waved her off. Needing space, she retreated to her dressing room, where she sat, staring at her reflection, replaying the exchange in her mind. Social media, meanwhile, was a wildfire. Clips of the clash had spread beyond the initial posts, now dissected on talk shows and blogs. Commentators weighed in, some praising Kelly's courage, others accusing her of overstepping. Perry's fans rallied, flooding platforms with defenses of his work, while critics seized the moment to rehash old grievances. The narrative was slipping out of both their hands, shaped by strangers with keyboards. Kelly's team monitored the storm, drafting a potential statement, but they hesitated. Anything they said now risked fanning the flames. In the SUV, Perry's phone lit up with a call from his publicist, a sharp-witted woman named Carla. She didn't sugarcoat things. The story was everywhere, and silence wasn't an option. She urged him to make a statement, something short, direct, to cut through the noise. Perry listened, his jaw tight, but agreed only to consider it. He wasn't ready to react, not when his emotions were still raw. Instead, he asked Marcus to pull up footage of the interview, wanting to see it with fresh eyes. The tablet screen flickered to life, and there it was, Kelly's probing questions. His own measured responses. The moment his patience snapped, watching himself stand and walk off, Perry felt a mix of pride and regret. He'd stood his ground, but at what cost? At the studio, Kelly's dressing room door stayed closed. She scrolled through her phone, skimming the posts, wincing at the harsher ones. A few messages from friends popped up, offering support, but also questions. Had she planned to go that hard? Was there bad blood? She ignored them, her mind on Perry. She respected him, always had, but she'd wanted to dig deeper, to have a real conversation. Maybe she'd misjudged the line. Her assistant knocked, handing her a coffee and a note from the producer. The network wanted a response by morning. Kelly nodded, but her focus was elsewhere, wondering what Perry was thinking, what he'd do next. The SUV slowed in traffic, and Perry leaned back, his mind clearer now. He told Marcus to set up a meeting with his team, not for a statement, but for something bigger. He'd built his career on telling stories, and this moment, messy as it was just another one. He'd reclaim it, not with a tweet or a press release, but with something that carried his voice, his truth. As the car moved toward his hotel, he began to sketch out a plan, his resolve hardening with every mile. The SUV pulled up to a sleek hotel in West Hollywood, its glass facade reflecting the fading sunlight. Tyler Perry stepped out, his posture deliberate, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by. Marcus trailed behind, juggling calls as they entered the lobby, where the hum of conversation dipped as heads turned. Perry's presence was magnetic, even now, but his focus was inward, his mind racing with ideas. Up in his suite, he gathered his inner circle, Carla, his publicist, a strategist named Lena, and Marcus, who'd already set up a laptop for a virtual call with the rest of the team. The room buzzed with purpose as they sat around a glass table, the city skyline sprawling beyond the windows. Carla spoke first, her voice clipped, laying out the optics. The story had grown legs, with outlets now speculating about Perry's temperament, Kelly's motives, even the state of their careers. Lena suggested a measured response, maybe a post emphasizing Perry's legacy, but Perry cut her off. He wasn't interested in damage control or playing defense. Instead, he pitched something bolder, a public conversation, not on someone else's stage, but his own. A live stream, maybe, or a short film, something raw, addressing the criticism head-on while telling his story. The team leaned in, intrigued, but cautious, as Perry sketched out his vision, his voice steady, conviction growing. Across town, Kelly Clarkson sat in her dressing room, the show long over, but its weight still heavy. The mirror reflected, a face tired but resolute. Her phone buzzed with a text from her manager, urging her to draft a statement, but Kelly wasn't ready. She'd seen the latest posts, the ones calling her out, others defending her. The noise was deafening, and she hated how it twisted the moment. She hadn't meant to ambush Perry. She'd wanted a real dialogue, something honest. Now, she wondered if she'd misread him, if her push for authenticity had come off as an attack. She scribbled notes on a pad, trying to find words that felt true. But nothing landed right. Back at the hotel, Perry's team was in motion. Marcus pulled up data on audience reach, while Lena mapped out platforms for Perry's response. Carla pushed for a quick turnaround, citing the news cycle's relentless pace. Perry listened, but his focus was on the message. He'd talk about his work, his roots, the women who shaped him, and why his stories mattered. He wanted it to feel personal, not polished. A direct line to those who'd watched the clash and judged him. The team debated logistics, from production to timing, as Perry stood by the window, the city lights blurring into streaks. He felt the weight of the moment but also its potential, a chance to redefine the narrative. Kelly, meanwhile, decided to act. She called her producer, suggesting they release a brief clip from the interview, unedited, to show the full context. The producer hesitated, worried it might escalate things, but Kelly insisted. She wanted transparency, even if it was messy. As her team prepped the footage, she sat back, her mind drifting to Perry. She respected his hustle, his empire, but she also stood by her questions. Still, she wondered if there was a way to bridge the gap, to talk it out, off camera. She jotted down a private message to Perry, unsure if she'd send it, her pen hovering over the page. In the hotel suite, Perry's plan took shape. The team settled on a live stream scheduled for the next evening, hosted on his own platform to avoid any filters. He'd speak directly, no script, just him and the truth. As the meeting wrapped, Perry felt a spark of clarity. This wasn't just about the clash, it was about everything he'd built, everything he stood for. He nodded to Marcus, who began coordinating with the production crew. The energy in the room, electric with purpose. Perry glanced at his phone, seeing a new message, but he set it aside, his focus locked on the path ahead. The next evening, Tyler Perry's hotel suite transformed into a makeshift studio. A single camera stood ready, its lens trained on a simple setup. Perry in a chair, the city skyline a muted backdrop through the window. No crew cluttered the space, just Marcus adjusting the lighting and Lena monitoring the live stream feed on a laptop. Perry sat, his charcoal suit swapped for a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, his demeanor calm but resolute. The clock ticked closer to the broadcast time, and the team's nerves hummed, though Perry's focus was unshakable. He'd spent the day refining his thoughts, not scripting them, but shaping a message that felt true. The phone, he'd ignored. Last night sat on the table, its screen dark, the unread message from Kelly Clarkson still waiting. Across town, Kelly was at home, her living room a contrast to the studio's chaos. She sat on her couch, a glass of iced tea sweating on the coffee table. Her phone propped up as she watched Perry's live stream link go live. Her team had released the unedited interview clip earlier that day, and the response was mixed. Some praised her transparency, others called it a desperate move. Kelly ignored the noise, her eyes on the screen. She'd sent Perry a message last night, a private note apologizing for how things escalated, but standing by her intent to spark real conversation. He hadn't responded, and she didn't expect him to, but she hoped he'd see it before this broadcast. The live stream began. Perry looked into the camera, his voice steady, warm, like he was speaking to a friend. He didn't mention Kelly by name, didn't dwell on the clash. Instead, he told his story. Growing up in New Orleans, watching his mother and aunts navigate a world that tried to break them, how their resilience shaped his films. He spoke of the criticism he'd faced, not shying away from it, but framing it against the lives he aimed to reflect. His words were raw, unpolished, carrying a weight that silenced the chatter in the comments section. Viewers, thousands strong, watched their reactions a mix of awe and reflection. Kelly listened, her expression softening. Perry's words weren't just a defense. They were a window into why he told the stories he did. She felt a pang of regret, not for her questions, but for how they'd landed. She typed a quick comment on the livestream anonymous among the flood, praising his honesty. She didn't expect him to see it, but it felt right. Her phone buzzed with texts from her team, urging her to respond publicly, but she stayed focused on Perry's voice, letting it sink in. In the hotel suite, Perry hit his stride. He spoke of accountability, of listening to critics but also trusting his own vision. He didn't apologize for walking off, but he acknowledged the moment, calling it human, a reaction to feeling misunderstood. The comments section exploded, some calling it powerful, others still skeptical, but the tide was shifting. Lena whispered to Marcus that the viewership was climbing, the engagement off the charts. Perry didn't notice, his focus locked on the camera, on the people he knew were watching. Some who'd doubted him, others who'd always believed. As the live stream ended, Perry leaned back, exhaling. Marcus and Lena exchanged looks, knowing they'd pulled off something big. Social media was already shifting. posts now focusing on Perry's message rather than the clash. Kelly, still on her couch, set her phone down, a small smile breaking through. She didn't know if they'd ever talk again, but she felt a resolve to keep pushing for real conversations, even if they were messy. Perry, across town, finally, checked his phone. Seeing Kelly's message, he didn't reply, but a flicker of respect crossed his face. The moment had passed, but its impact lingered, a story neither would forget.